Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Muslim CEO show. This is the place for you if you want to become an amazing leader and grow your business and organization to the next level. I am your brother and host, Muhammad AlShareef, and today I am excited and honored to have with me the legendary Shaykh Muhammad AlShareef. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm great.
Good. I'm really excited to have you here. The reason why I'm excited to have Sheikh here is because Sheikh Muhammad AlShareef is someone who I consider a huge inspiration in my own life. He's someone who's been a teacher to me. He's been a mentor to me. He's been a friend to me. And really, I'm really excited because, Sheikh, one of the things I was looking at, right, is the amount of interviews that you've done. I haven't seen a great many interviews from you, like actually talking to you. So I'm really honored.
No, because nobody wants to interview me.
Okay, excellent. So I'm just going to give a very brief overview for anyone that doesn't know the Sheikh. So Shaykh Muhammad AlShareef is the founder of AlMaghrib Institute. His parents raised him on the motto, nothing is impossible. I really like that, by the way. And so what he did is he basically memorized Quran from a very young age. He studied in Madinah University, Islamic Law. But he's also the founder of DiscoverU, which is an Islam-based personal development institute. And he's done things like Visionaire and Niche Hero and coaching and lots of other stuff that you probably know about. And he's also a guy who I know has been on, mashallah, tabarakallah, more Hajjs than anyone else I know. And he is the one who launched HajjCoach.com, which is basically a resource to help pilgrims that go to Hajj every year. So Sheikh, there's so much that we can go into. But I just wanted to say Jazakallah khair, because I know that the way you deal with requests is very different to how most people deal with them. So I really appreciate you being here with us today. So I want to start with one question, Sheikh. What was Shaykh Muhammad like at 10 years old?
So Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa ala amma ba'd. So 10 years old, you know, when I was a little kid growing up in Winnipeg, which is like middle of Canada, and I memorized about like 20 surahs, which is something like half of Juz Amma. And in that little town, that little city, that was like, I knew more Quran than like everybody. So I was Mr. Cool. I memorized, you know, half of Juz Amma. And that was me, 10 years old. I went to Quran school when I was 11, 12. But 10 years old, that was just me hanging out in Winnipeg, growing up with my bicycle.
Do you remember anything about how you saw life in terms of like what you wanted to do or any like what you wanted to grow up to be, anything like that?
I mean, being frank here, the city that I was in, I was like the only brown kid in the school, in the entire school. You know, like the one kid who had, you know, the name Mohammad. And I remember the teacher once saying that, or the most popular name in the world was Mohammed. And then nobody believed that because they're like, Mohammed, you're the only kid in this whole school, in the whole city named Mohammed. And there was a very small Muslim community, but so I don't know. I experienced a lot of quote unquote racism growing up, and it really kind of shaped me to. If you see me do things differently than what normal people did, is because I didn't fit in growing up, and that kind of, you know, molded me to, well, if I'm gonna succeed in life, I need to do my own thing. So.
Amazing. Okay, so we have you in this small town, Winnipeg. Whenever I see a map of Canada and they show Winnipeg, I always point to it. I'm like, the only reason I know it is because you mention it, right? And so you're in this small town. How does it go from being in this tiny town where like you're one of the few Muslims there to today, alhamdulillah, where you've built something like AlMaghrib Institute, which, you know, alhamdulillah, is global. It's in so many different cities and countries, and you have the top instructors and everything. How does it go from there to there?
It's a big leap right there. I would say that, you know, my motto being in a small town is, you know, man, I gotta get out of this town. Tracy Chapman. Man, I'm gonna get my Corvette. I'm driving out of here. I remember one person saying, I was telling them, you know, on one of my visits back home to Winnipeg, and they were like, oh, you're gonna travel overseas, you're gonna study Islam, you're gonna do this, and then you're gonna come back here to Winnipeg and be the imam, right? I'm like, hell no, I'm not coming back here. I'm gone. I'm never coming back. So I always had this, I wanted to go to the big city. I had opportunities to go to big cities, Washington, D.C. and other places. And I took those. And in those big cities, I was connected with big players. And alhamdulillah, those kind of connections made a difference to raising my game and also, spreading the word around. Yeah.
So when you got back from, because obviously lots of people go to Madinah University, alhamdulillah, but not everyone goes away and then starts something like AlMaghrib on that level. So what kind of happened? Like when you got back from there, you decided obviously not to be the Imam bin Peg. So what did you do then?
So I always tell people the story. When I was like in first year in Madinah University, I was excited about what I was learning. I was there in Madinah for 6 years. So from day one, I was excited about what I was learning. Basically, I had come from a background where half of Juz Amma was, the most knowledgeable kid in the town, to Madinah University, where all these amazing people, Muslims from around the world, were coming together. And I wanted to share it. And I just had this idea, when I go home, I'm going to do this night school, and I'm going to get teachers, and, everything's going to be, I wanted to share what I learned from day one. And I always had that attitude. And alhamdulillah, again, I had good mentors in my small city that had big dreams, and they were kind of like sharing their dreams with me, and that kind of like built me up as well.
Okay, so this is quite interesting because I want to kind of get into the mindset a little bit of someone who's at a Madinah University, and obviously a lot of people have said that it's very tough to be there. But how is it? Why do you think that you had that kind of mindset where you, instead of like in year one, you're saying you were thinking about how you're going to go back and kind of use this? Like, where did that come from?
So what's interesting is that I'll share with you kind of like a personal story that I was not the smartest kid in Madinah University. And there were much more, and a lot of British students were much more smarter than me. But now what happened? So here's the thing. So there was one British student. He's actually a good friend of mine who was very knowledgeable. Like, this is a person who was like always getting marks in the upper 90s, and I'm like 70s, and trying to pass exams and stuff like that. And there was a time after when I graduated that I got invited to the UK, and they asked this brother about me. And then he's like, Mohammad, he doesn't know anything. He used to, flunk grades and stuff like that. So they retracted my invitation because this person's like, look, there's more knowledgeable people that you can invite. And then later on, when AlMaghrib and things got bigger, then they re-invited me. I'm like, look, I'm never coming back to your thing. But what I learned from that is that it's more than just education. If you look at like Americans in general, so many countries think they're smarter than the Americans, but the Americans dominate. So there's something more than just smarts that gets you to the next level. It's not just, hey, if I do good in school, that I will be successful. That's not the whole picture. Okay. And alhamdulillah that I spent years in the US, and I kind of like adopted that kind of like, business mindset and bigger ideas and leading people and stuff like that. I learned that kind of attitude from being in the US.
Mashallah. So when you got back from Medina, then you started teaching first in Islamic school, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. I taught in an Islamic school when I first came back. That was my first job.
And so then did you just start AlMaghrib on the side, or did you quit the job, or how did you do it?
So at the Islamic school, they were, like I said, I had really great mentors and people with big ideas, and they wanted me working on Islamic curriculum. So from hey, he's from Madinah University, let him work on Islamic curriculum. I wasn't producing too much Islamic curriculum stuff. And then after a couple of years, they said, you know what, we need Islamic teachers, so go kind of like a step down, step down and become a teacher. And then I was like, look, you know what, instead of me writing a curriculum for the students, let me write a curriculum for the teachers. And that kind of led to, hey, if I'm going to teach the teachers so that all these teachers can teach it, then you know what, then it developed into Islamic studies, then it developed into AlMaghrib Institute, that kind of attitude. Like, not a direct jump, but that was kind of like the line of thinking.
So did you just kind of like practically, what did you do? Did you just start like teaching them first, and then you did some courses on your own, like a one-day course, or like, because we just want to get into like the nitty-gritty of how did you start this huge thing? Because when you look at it now, it just looks like impossible to start, but obviously, alhamdulillah, you did start it. So
okay, so it came from, I know I'm going back many years now, but it came from this. So I was teaching in Islamic school, and people would invite me on the weekends. There's a huge Islamic network of masajid and cities in the US, which is gigantic. Like if I lived in the US, I'd probably never leave, just because there's so many invitations and masajid and cities. So I would prioritize the universities. And the university students, I really like to go and be with students and stuff like that, many of the universities across the US. And there would always be like, okay, what are you going to be talking about when you come? So I started to get annoyed that all these lectures are always a male, female, gender relation type lectures. And I'm just repeating myself, and nobody's really learning anything. And then I started saying to myself, hey, you guys, instead of you telling me what my speeches are going to be, why don't I tell you what the speeches are going to be? And instead of me coming and teaching like something for real over the weekend that you invite me, and instead of me coming for one weekend, why don't we do 2 weekends and actually make it like a real class? And then why don't I get it accredited? And why don't we, and so, like I said, these are pieces of the puzzle that came together to make AlMaghrib Institute.
Amazing, alhamdulillah. Okay, great. Sheikh, I don't know if you remember this, but we met around 12 or 13 years ago, okay? And it's very funny because I remember the first ever conversation we had, right? We were in GPU, and AlMaghrib UK London hadn't started, but I knew that I was going to be part of the original team there at that time. So I came over to you and had a little, we had like a couple of sentences, I think, right? And it's quite interesting because at that time, I had just started, I'd been a salesman in Xerox for a few years, and I was telling you about the psychology of selling, right? Because most people, they don't know this stuff, especially like, Madinah graduates, right? They don't know about this marketing stuff and everything. And I remember having this discussion with you, right? And I was like, I'm going to like try and tell the Sheikh how marketing works, right? So we had this discussion, and then you started saying some stuff about marketing. And I was like, wow, okay, that's very interesting, right? And now, like, when I look back at it, I feel quite like ashamed that I was trying to teach marketing and stuff, because for me, like, when I look at AlMaghrib, if I was to like pinpoint one of the biggest successes of it, I would say, alhamdulillah, that marketing and knowing marketing has been a massive, massive part of the success. So I just wanted to kind of delve into that a little bit as to like, why is marketing so important to you? Why do you think you made it such a big deal for AlMaghrib?
So marketing, I think the year was about 2001, kind of like at the beginning, the start of, even before I launched AlMaghrib Institute, I was just in the idea phase. And there was a brother, African-American, elderly brother in the community in Maryland. And he said this word marketing. And I actually, until then, I kind of heard that word before, but I didn't really know what it meant. So after I heard him say this, I went to the bookstore, the local bookstore in College Park, Maryland, and I went to the marketing section, and I found this book called The Immutable Laws of Marketing. And, I think it was even on sale. I took it home, and I basically, every chapter that this is the law of marketing, I would say, well, how can I apply that to this idea that I have from AlMaghrib Institute? Next chapter, how can I apply this? How can I apply this? I'm taking notes on the side and whatnot. And actually, kind of like a side point, the secret or one of the key ingredients is not necessarily that I read this book, but I used to always read books. So actually, book reading is also one of the key secrets, that when I learn something, I like to go and research it, find a book on the topic, get through the book quickly, and figure out, kind of like embrace this kind of the knowledge of that book. And then I kicked off AlMaghrib. That book came at the perfect time, that everything that AlMaghrib was built on marketing principles. And at that time, inshallah ta'ala, I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me the ajr for kind of like the shift that happened in the dawah, because I started really putting quality into making posters, making the design. I realized that a lot of the flyers that would go out for Islamic events were just information it wasn't really marketing. It was just like it was a, like at this time, at this place, it wasn't really marketing or wasn't. So I said, you know what, if McDonald's has the best marketing for their burger and we have Islam, we don't package it and people don't see it except in ugly papers of, hey, we got a halakha and this is the time and place, and the photocopies, if you remember, there's a black line on this ugly Xerox photocopy. and I'm like, Islam deserves better than this. So just kind of like extra point that when we did those first AlMaghrib posters, there was little kids. I was at an Islamic school and I was sitting in my office and listening to kids look at the poster, and I heard little children, Muslim kids, say, I'm so excited for this class. It feels like a movie's coming to town. And in my heart, I'm like, alhamdulillah, that I was able to get that kind of excitement towards people studying Islam.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I think it's amazing, and I think that those of us that are a little bit older, maybe we understand it, but those that are, a bit younger now, like they can't imagine what it was like, where literally it was like, you just have very simple information kind of things where it would just show you when an event's happening. I mean, even the kind of video trailers that AlMaghrib did in the early days, like revolutionary stuff. And it's funny because now when I walk into masajid, I remember I messaged you about a year ago, I walked into this masjid and I just saw this poster there and I was like, this is a poster because, alhamdulillah, like people like yourself had basically higher standards when it came to Islam and actually saying, look, this deserves much more. So I think it's amazing that, alhamdulillah, you did that and you played your part in that. What I want to ask you is that, is there any difference, like marketing to the Muslim audience? Because now your marketing experience is way beyond where you first started. That time you didn't even have that much data, right? But now you've been doing marketing for DiscoverU, you've been doing marketing for this, and like, do you find there's any difference between marketing to the Muslim audience?
And I have a master's degree in marketing now, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
I do know that because I remember you did a master's. So did you finish it? Yeah, because I didn't know you finished.
Yes.
It. Okay, mashallah. So now you have masters. Okay, great.
So, so the Muslim audience, one of the things about the Muslim audience is that I see a lot of young Muslims kind of like learn marketing from non-Muslims and then just try to apply that, with everything. Whatever they see outside, they try to bring it into the masjid and bring it to the Muslim community, and it comes off really nasty. And I think there's been some nasty experiences that people had. So one of those things that's really messed up is, there's people online that show off in their, I'm talking about non-Muslims, show off. It's like, hey, I've got a yacht, I've got a private jet, I've got, piles of money, like I'm some, some gangster and stuff like that. And then imagine marketing to the Muslim community, and he's like, my name is Ali G. I got, money, I got yacht, I got a mansion, and this is my Lamborghini. And some Muslims, so it goes against our ethics. Like, so that's not what Muslims do. And if you're trying to attract a Muslim audience, then why would you show off to get your message across? The other thing that I find that Muslims sometimes make mistakes with is there's some people that are into commodity type of products. So commodities such as they sell apples or they sell taxi services or something like that. And so in commodity type of products, there's a heavy emphasis on price discount, bargain basement, and hey, we've got 25% off and this and that. So when Muslims come along and try that approach, which is the hey, we got a commodity and 50% off, 25% off, 2-for-1 offers, that kind of stuff, it turns the topic from, hey, we're learning about Islam, or this is like something to benefit the Muslim community, and turns it into a discussion about money and pricing and bargain basement. And I find that Islamic stuff is it's unbefitting of that kind of a discussion. And so a lot of times when we would do our products, I would say, I don't want to ever deal with price discounts. I just want everybody to focus on what is it that is being sold and let them focus on the value of that. And we're not going to talk about, discounts and 25% off and, ends at this.
Okay, excellent. So in terms of like, you're saying that obviously like the whole discounting, because you'll devalue the kind of thing that you're offering. Also, you're saying like not showing off and not copying everything that the non-Muslims do in their marketing approach. Is there something unique that you advise people, like organizations and others that are doing marketing, that they should be doing for the Muslims? So those are things they shouldn't avoid. Is there anything they should be doing?
You're talking about Muslims or non-Muslims?
No, Muslims marketing to Muslims.
One of the key things that I would advise is somebody focus on what is the benefit of their product to their customer. What is the benefit? Like, how is this different? How is this going to benefit? What I was saying earlier about the price discount is I find that people focus too much on the money aspect of how much it costs, but you haven't really sold the person as to why would they want this in the first place. So whether you're selling, I don't know, books, or you're selling jilbabs, or you're selling lotas, or whatever it is that a person is selling, you want to speak about how will this make your life easier, and focus on that. What's the solution? What's the problem that your product is solving, and really get into that kind of thing.
I mean, Sheikh, one of the things I see that whenever you release something, like the way it's marketed is amazing, the kind of product that you create. Do you have some sort of formula for the way you kind of create your products?
So what I would recommend, so there's two things that I focus on when building a product. Number one is I look at where do I inherently focus my attention on. So what books what are the last 10 books that I read? And I might find, hey, there's a theme going in those books. Or maybe the last 50 books that I read, there's a theme there. And with those themes, I realize, hey, I really care about this topic. I'm really studying naturally, organically. So if I do a class on this topic, it's going to be good because I already love this topic in the first place. So first tip that I would give is focus on a topic that you really are naturally inclined to, and then it'll show when you do the marketing that you are genuinely excited about it. The other thing that I try to match up is just because you're excited about something doesn't mean the community is excited about it. So if I'm like, I love thermodynamics, I want to teach you guys thermodynamics, nobody cares. People, there might be like some aunties want to get, their daughters married or something like that. They don't care about your thermodynamics. So so you also want to couple that with what's a problem that the Muslim community has. And if there was a red button, that if you press the red button, it would solve their problem, you want to sell the red button. So your product needs to be like, hey, press this button. Remember that problem that all of you guys have? Yeah, press this red button, it will be solved. So you want to combine those two things. This is what I love to do, and hey, I see a problem that you guys got, and from what I love, if you press this red button, it will be solved. Let me sell to you this red button, or how to press the red button in a service type business.
I mean, it's quite interesting what you mentioned, because I remember with something like Visionaire, in 2008, when you came down for the launch in the UK, between the 2 weekends of breach of covenant, we were like, what are we doing during the week, Sheikh? And you said, well, I'm going to Scotland or something, right? And I said, okay, who are you going with? And you said, well, I'm going alone. I was like, well, this guy is weird, right? Like, why is he going Scotland alone? And then I realized many years later that basically you were doing Visionaire on your own, like, for years before you released it. Like, tell us a little bit about that, because today we have like the opposite mentality. I learned something, right? I'm going to make a course, I'm going to sell it, I'm going to go for it, right? But with Visionaire, it was very different.
So that's kind of what I was saying about something that you care about over many years, or something that, there's a trend. Visionaire was something very dear to my heart that I've been doing for like last 15 years, maybe even longer than that, on my own for many of those years. And at some of those locations, I might get lonely in the isolation, and I go, I wish there could be some people that could be here with me, and for me to, go through this program with them. So, a small group of people. So that eventually became, hey, you know what? I want to teach this. I care about it. Nobody understands what it is anyway, but let's all go to St. Andrews, Scotland. And that was where we first had our first Visionaire, 2013 or something like that.
Oh, sure. Okay, excellent. So, Sheikh, you keep mentioning books, right? And I know books are a huge part of your life. Tell me a little bit about, before we go into books, tell me a little bit about personal development, because obviously with DiscoverU, it's kind of like Islam-based personal development and stuff. Like I had this kind of argument with someone, and they were just like, Muslims just don't care about personal development, right? Like, is that your belief as well, that Muslims, they're not really into it like the non-Muslims where the industry's huge and stuff? Or is it that we're just a little bit behind and we've still got that kind of Asian mentality? Or like, what do you think about personal development in general?
This friend of yours that said Muslims don't care, does he care?
Yeah, I think he cares in it, but he doesn't believe that the Muslim market believes in it like he does.
Um, so for sure, Muslim community does care. It goes back to marketing. So if if I'm like trying to tell people, hey, I really like XYZ personal development program, and nobody's buying into it, it's not necessarily like the conclusion is that they don't care. The conclusion is, well, you haven't explained it properly to them, or maybe your sample size to come to that conclusion is very small, and you haven't seen the Muslim community. From my experience, that human beings like to develop themselves, actually Muslim or non-Muslim. It's a human trait that we want to grow. So if somebody is presenting that to a Muslim community in a way that speaks their language, that excites them, and they want to develop, they will listen to that. It just depends on, you know, that person, if they can communicate it in an effective way or not.
Amazing. So what are, like, do you feel the most important areas for kind of Muslims in terms of like developing themselves and stuff?
I find that based on people's excuses, the number or the top two excuses people have are I don't have enough money and I don't have enough time. So time comes first and then money comes close. So that you tell them, hey, why don't you do XYZ? You know what, subhanAllah, I'd love to, but I don't have any time. And the second thing they would say is like, man, that sounds so great, but subhanAllah, I don't have any money. So I tell people that two of the areas that I find are most important to resolve really early on in your life is managing your time, like figuring this out, because your whole life you're going to need the time. And so that you never say to anybody, hey, I don't have time. My response is I always have time for the things that I care about. So yeah, and it's kind of like a side point. A lot of times people say to me something like, Mohammed, I know you're really busy and you don't have that much time. Actually, you know what? I'm actually very not busy.
Yeah, they don't know.
And I have lots of time, but for the things that I care about, you know, it's like protecting it. The other thing is about money, where a person says, well, you know, this sounds amazing, this could change my life, but I can't afford it. And I would tell people, if you don't master your money, then you become its slave. So it's like, take the time to master the money issue so that your whole life you don't have to be like giving up on things just because, well, I don't have money, I have to go to work, don't have money, I have to go to work, that kind of stuff. And figure out money, figure out time. I'd say those are the top two things people should focus on from the get-go.
Okay, amazing. And so, you know, you're like really into books. You read a lot of books, a lot more, I think, in the last few years as well, mashallah. How do you choose like a great book on a topic?
I have a course on this, and it's like a 2-hour course that I explain how to choose like really good books. But let me give you 3 top points how to choose a really good book. First off, you just search for, you know, that topic that you're looking for. Let's say time management, and see what are the best sellers, what are the top, you know, that's like a first go. Like, you don't want to miss out on that. So if there's a top seller that has like 50,000 people reviewed it and 4.9 out of 5, you know what, you got your best book. Go and read it and figure it out. If it's not from that area, I usually go with the reviews, the sample size, and I really I don't look at people's comments. I look at the overall number, because you can always have a positive comment and not a negative comment about a book, but look at what's the overall. If like have a lot of people reviewed it, what is the general number, is it, and so on. So based on the reviews, based on the search, that kind of thing. That's how I find my books.
Okay.
Go through all the bestsellers first off, and yeah, work from there.
I mean, how many books do you think you've read? Like,
so my course is how to read 100 books a year. And that I actually read about 150 books every year.
Wow.
Cover to cover.
Amazing.
So,
okay.
And just like yesterday, I read a book within 24 hours, and the day before, you know, 36 hours. So I'm on a good roll right now.
Okay, amazing. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, Sheikh, like regarding personal development and stuff, is really yourself, because I think like over the years, I've introduced you to many of my cousins, friends, family, all these kind of guys, right? And after they meet you, when they go away, they're all very surprised, because they're like, this guy's not like the way I see him in like the videos and everything. Like he's like, he's quiet, and he's like introverted, and he takes time to think about an answer, and he's like just pauses like for 2 minutes, and it's like he's very different to how we see him on camera. So Sheikh, do you classify yourself as an introvert? Like how did you manage to like break through that, like, which is your natural personality, and actually go out there for the sake of Allah and like be like who you needed to be on camera?
So I think there's a misconception about like introverted people, that introverted people actually, when they speak, they actually say amazing things because they've thought through what they want to say before they say it. So if you see me on stage, or you see a really good speaker on stage, I'm not saying I'm a good speaker, but just saying, this person has thought through really deeply what they want to say. And sometimes when I'm on stage, I imagine myself in the audience and I say, this is the speech that I want to listen to, because I'm very critical of, you know, speeches and Islamic topics, that I'm like, look, if I give a topic, then I want to make sure, like, I don't necessarily care about the audience, but I care, like, I would not want to be in an audience where I'm, you know, the speaker is just talking off the top of their head and not prepared. That annoys me. So when I'm speaking, like, I don't want to speak like that. When I'm around people coming up with ideas, and like, if you ask me directly, you know, when I'm in a meeting, I usually tell like my team that I can't come up with ideas during a meeting because I have to pause and think it over. But if we're in a meeting and you ask me a question, then I'm not going to have an answer. I can share with you some results of what I thought about, but my thinking happens outside of the meeting. And the team knows that. They're like, sure, no problem. Come back tomorrow and let us know what you thought. So that's why if I'm sitting with a person, they're asking me some deep questions, it's not my nature to think while I'm talking to somebody.
And like, you know, your natural personality, do you feel like you had to develop that in a certain way to be on camera, to be able to give speeches, or do you feel that was very natural to you?
Let's say, I mean, everything needs to, like, I have templates of my speeches and I do prepare. So it's not about being natural. You know, I'm sure there were times, actually, I'm trying to remember like the first time I gave a speech, and it was a pretty good speech. So I think the reason that, alhamdulillah, the speeches worked out really good is I care about what I'm saying. Like, so if somebody gives me a topic that is not my forte, it's not my, you know, what I care about, I'll tell them from the get-go, you know what, can we skip that topic? Let me talk about something that I care about. And I think that's really helped me, is when I speak about things I care about, and I avoid, you know, topics that don't, you know, it's not my style.
Okay, great. Last question I want to ask you regarding personal development, just before we move on to the next topic, is that when it comes to, like, you know, personal development is about having high standards. Like you said, that you felt like the Dawah deserved better marketing than McDonald's or a movie or anything, right? How do you balance between, for example, if I'm going to try and make money, or I'm going to try and, you know, do something out there, how do I balance that whole thing that Muslims have this kind of guilt feeling where, oh yeah, I'm going too much into my business, I'm doing too much into my dunya, and I'm trying to have high standards in my business, but then at the same time, like my akhirah is not focused on, and my deen, and so that whole balance, and I think you really helped me resolve that, you know, with Nishiro and stuff. But what's the kind of thinking around that?
How did you resolve it in Nishiro?
I think for me, I started to realize that what I was ultimately doing, if I was really doing it for the sake of Allah, like, this was just kind of, it was just kind of like, it was just belief system, like you say, BS. It was just, I don't know, it was just talk in my head. I kind of overcame that talk, I think, in Nishiro, that I started to realize that this is just about getting on with it and doing it, you know. For me, that's how I felt about it.
So what I spoke about in Nishiro, for those who don't know, Nishiro is a business course that I taught. If you remember, Mohammad, what I said is you want to combine a product that is something that is fun for you, that you love, and also benefits the people. fun and love and profitable. So, you know, those three. So when you think about a product that benefits people, then it becomes really easy to combine dunya and akhirah, because your intention is to benefit people and to, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, win his love and benefit people. And it's something that you enjoy, and it's something that is profitable. So if you find something that combines those three things, then you know what, right there, you've combined dunya and akhirah, because you're spending time on something that's for the sake of Allah. And that's different than if somebody is selling something that they don't really think benefits people or is going to bring them closer to the hereafter. Hey, I'm selling, for example, cat toys, like toys for cats. And they were like, I don't know if this really benefits people. You'll see a lot of those kind of people that are selling those things, they move on to other products after a while. Nothing wrong with that. They're actually earning halal income, halal rizq, and providing for the family, so they can have the good intentions. It's just you have to be creative about the good intentions there. But other than that, I would tell people that if your thought is always like my business at night when you're in salah, my business, you're not taking care of your health, you're not taking care of your family, then I think that two things, that makes your business weak because you're bottlenecking the business. And number two is when you're out of balance and stressed, that shows up in like a really horrible product. So it's like, take a breather, take care of your salah, you know, end of the day, 5 o'clock, shut everything down, go spend time with your family, go for a walk, go for a jog. And when you're in balance, your business will do better.
Inshallah. Okay, so that's a really great point you've made, that basically if it's not a sucker's choice where you have to either go deen or either go dunya, like we can have both, inshallah, right? And so you're saying that if you actually align your core focus and stuff, that could actually help you. But how does someone kind of go about doing that? Let's say like I'm someone who's experienced and I've got stuff and I've done stuff, but I'm not really sure, but I'm looking for that higher purpose, right? And not everyone's going to go off and start an institute or something. So how do I get that higher purpose without, like, you know, having that background in Islamic studies or something like that?
So I want to emphasize here that halal rizq, like the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when somebody goes to their wife, that they would be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have marital relations. So the companions radiallahu anhu said, you know, how can that be that somebody is fulfilling their desire and they'll be rewarded? And the Prophet ﷺ said, don't you see that if this person had done it in haram, there would have been sin upon them. So the same thing goes, if they fulfill it in halal, they'll be rewarded. So if somebody has, you know, just your basic jobs, and they don't have like some, you know, big idea, but they're providing for their family, they're providing shelter, they're, you know, they're balanced, they pray in the masjid. They don't have to open some Islamic institute. They just have to have the intention to earn halal rizq, to earn halal provision and income. And with that intention, that is a higher intention, they'll be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The key is making the intention. So let's suppose somebody drives a taxi, and they go out in the morning and they make the intention, hey, I'm going to take the morning shift, I want to pray in the masjid, I want to pray Fajr in the masjid, and I want to earn halal rizq because I have children that have to make sure they go to a good school and take care of my wife and provide family. Then that is the blessed higher purpose that we're talking about.
Amazing. Okay, I love that. Great. So I wanted to kind of move the topic to leadership, right? Because like I said before, you know, I feel like Niche Hero like really kind of helped me to become a much better leader. Like I want to understand from you, like, what is leadership for you, and a bit about your experience of it.
So I was going to teach a course on leadership, and I found that a lot of the books on leadership are bakwas. Bakwas, meaning that there's a lot of fluff, and I just could not find some solid ground on the topic of leadership. So instead, I kind of like made my own formula and just went with that. But the analogy that I give for leadership is like a big tanker, a big like ship. A big ship, and the leader is kind of like that captain at the front who needs to chart the course. Now, on a ship, there are so many people who are more skilled than the captain in what they're doing. People are running the engines, people are running all these different, they're more skilled, But all of them, all these moving parts, need a captain to chart the course. They're like, we're here and all our talents is here. This is a digital marketer, this is a copywriter, this is, a graphic designer, and this is a salesperson, stuff like that. But the leader needs to chart the course, to come up with the big ideas, the wow ideas, and chart the course. This is the direction that we're going. This is the pivot that we're moving. We're going to turn left. We're going to turn right during this downturn or whatever. This is how we're going to navigate it. Everybody's ready to go. But for me, the leader, and unfortunately, sometimes the leader kind of becomes like lazy and is not charting the course, tries to do some of the tries to go to the lower decks and tries doing other people's jobs and stuff. Usually they're doing the other jobs because they're avoiding their own responsibility of charting the course. And so that leader just, instead of complaining about other people, look, they need to chart the course. They need to everybody needs this person to get at the top and tell them where to go.
Well, what about the paradox, Sheikh, that we kind of see with leadership, in the sense that a lot of Muslims, some of us, we feel like, okay, so we're a leader, right? But at the same time, the deen is all about like, don't go for leadership. Leadership's not good. Leadership, like, how in your mind do you balance those two things up?
Whoever says Islam says don't go for leadership doesn't understand Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ said, every one of you is a shepherd and every one of you is responsible for their flock. So if everyone is a shepherd, that's literally saying everybody's a leader. So when a Muslim says don't go for leadership, I'm like, are you dumb? Do you not understand the deen? Don't you understand your responsibility? I remember one time somebody telling me that, oh, Muhammad, you memorize the Quran. You're going to be in big trouble if you don't follow what you learned. And I'm like, why would I be the one who's only in trouble? I worked really hard to memorize the Quran, and you were lazy all these years. You did nothing, and I'm the one who's going to be in trouble. You're in trouble too, because if you don't follow what Islam says, doesn't absolve you from responsibility. It just means that you're not fulfilling your responsibility. So everybody needs to be a leader.
Okay, amazing. And Sheikh, who's like a leader that's inspired you in your time?
When I started AlMaghrib Institute, the leader that really inspired me was Bill Gates. Bill Gates I really enjoyed because he had this vision to put a computer on everybody's desk, and that size of a vision really got me excited, because I was living in communities where everybody's like, you know what, if 10 people come to our halaqah, it was a good day. And I'd be like, forget 10 people coming to the halaqah. We need 300 people coming. We need, the whole stadium to be coming to this halaqah and stuff. So I appreciated that, the big vision that he had. And actually the idea of doing a retreat to plan the upcoming year, kind of like the Visionaire retreat, I learned it from Bill Gates originally, because Bill Gates does that. He, when he was working at Microsoft and he was like charting the upcoming year for Microsoft, he would go into seclusion for, I don't know how long he would go. And he would spend that time reading research, and people would get the chance to write their suggestions to Mr. Gates, and he would read through it. And then when he would come out of his retreat, he would tell everybody, these are the directions that Microsoft is going to be going to in the upcoming year. And I like that idea. I'm like, hey, if I'm going to plan my Ramadan, let me also go on a retreat and plan what I want to be making dua for in Ramadan.
Amazing. Okay, Sheikh, we're kind of coming to the end of our time together. A couple of things I want to kind of go through. So first is, I just wanted to ask you, like just general hacks, like tips, tricks, techniques, things that you can share with the audience that will help them to grow their organization, grow their business, help them to become greater leaders. What kind of general tips or hacks do you have?
So one of the most important hacks is surrounding yourself with eagles. And I say this a lot, eagles versus ducks. How do you get ducks to fly like eagles? And the answer is that ducks will never fly like eagles. They can't fly up in the sky. They're ducks. And just trying to change people, if you're surrounded by ducks and then later you get an eagle, the ducks are going to backbite on the eagle and harm the eagle. And the eagle's going to be like, forget you, and the eagle flies away. So if you see AlMaghrib Institute, I had this attitude really early on, and you see people like Yasser Qadi and Shaykh Muhammad AlShareef, people, and Omar Suleiman, and they came into AlMaghrib Institute, and they're all eagles because they found a collection of eagles, and they wanted to be in that presence. So surrounding yourself with eagles, people that fly high, versus people who their heads are in the gutter and they're always complaining and they're not going places. Second thing I would recommend is learning the art of delegation. And delegation isn't just about dumping work on somebody and they think you're using them. It's about steering the ship, as I said, that, hey, this is the direction that we want to go, and you have a great mission and a great destination. People want to be part of that destination, and then you're delegating. If you learn how to delegate stuff, even if you tell yourself, hey, I could do this myself, you're just going to bottleneck yourself, and you're not going to go anywhere in life. So you want to magnify. And delegation isn't always with other people. Delegation is sometimes through automation, through technology. So such as email lists and social media and things like that. That is also delegation. You're delegating these things out to computers and artificial intelligence. Finally, the last kind of tip that I would give you is having wow ideas. Now, a lot of people, when they come up with their ideas, they usually, the first thing that comes to their mind, they're like, wow, that sounds exciting. And they go to sleep, and then they spend the next 2-3 years implementing this idea that they spend 30 seconds thinking about. And they don't challenge the idea. And usually the idea is really lame, really cliche, just a copycat from somebody else. And if you're going to spend 3 years on an idea that took you 30 seconds to come up with, then spend a little bit more time and use tools to figure out what is a wow idea. So what I like to do is, with my target audience, is that if I ever come up with an idea, when I say that idea to somebody, I want their immediate response, their unconscious response, to be wow. I want them to respond like that. My target audience. And I'm being particular about target audience, because if you tell it to your mom or your dad, maybe they're not going to say wow, but they're not necessarily going to be the ones that are going to buy from you. So you want to focus on making products that really impresses your target audience and they want to learn more.
Okay, amazing. And Sheikh, what are apps and tools and resources that you use in your everyday life? Like, everyone has a few tools or apps or websites that they really use to help them in their daily life, and resources and books and stuff. What do you use?
I'll give for books. I'm really good at books. 2 books that I'd recommend for people who are have an idea and they want to market it. A book that kind of launched AlMaghrib Institute was this 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing by Al Ries. R-I-E-S is his last name. And the second book, for if you already have a business and you already have employees and you want to go to the next level, there's a book called Traction. Traction, subtitle is Get a Grip on Your Business to Grow Your Company, and that is by Gino Wickman. Wickman, yeah, W-I-C-K-M-A-N. So those are 2 books that I recommend. For apps, I don't really use any special apps more than what everybody else uses. My number one, for books, Audible is, listening to books. I learned a long time ago that I don't have to read a book in order to absorb its information. And I figure out a way to be able to read books, within 24 hours, I can complete a book. And that system I built into Book Hero, but Audible is a favorite of mine.
What about the main thing that people say, Jazakallah khair, by the way, I think they're really good books that you mentioned. What about people who say you do audiobooks? How do you retain anything? Surely if you just listen to audio, it's just gone, right? Compared to reading.
Yeah. So my response to that is, I believe that even if you read the book, you didn't retain it. You're just tricking yourself that you retained it. In either case, you have not retained it. What you need to focus on is another R word, and that is how do you reference it, or how do you retrieve it? How do you retrieve the information once you want to go back to? So what I'd recommend is, let's suppose somebody went through a book, and if you submerge yourself, and you finish the book in a very short time, then retrieval is, you know, you're creating bookmarks, so you can go back to the bookmarks. We have a book club, or whatever book club you do, where you're sharing gems. So that also is kind of like making the idea you can come back to the gems later on when you want to retrieve it. And then the third thing I'd say is go on YouTube, take the book name, summary, and somebody's made some cartoon summary book. If it's a popular book, there's a summary already there, or there's a slide share that where somebody has made a summary of the book. Whenever you need to find the summary and the key points and be reminded of it, it's there. So the key is not that how do I remember everything, which is impossible. The focus is how do I retrieve this in the future when I need to retrieve the key points.
Okay, amazing. All right, Sheikh, I've just remembered one really important point, right? This like defines you, and I forgot about this, right? You know, one of the things you said in Niche Hero, you talked about like really successful people and people who are not successful, and you said the fundamental thing that underpins the successful people is taking action, right? So just tell me a little bit about like, why is taking action so important? Why do you say it's so pivotal? And how do you kind of get yourself to take action? Because we're human beings, we feel lazy, we feel conflicted. Like, what's the secret to actually being that guy who, you know, in Madinah University, you're already thinking, how can I implement this? And then when you're doing stuff, you're implementing. Like, how do you become that implementer and that doer?
So, you know, it's actually a really big question that you're asking. It's not a small one.
Yeah.
Because how do you take action? I think even people who have studied this know that there's no like secret bullet on how to take action, because everybody has this problem. I taught a course, so I did Visionaire, and there's a lot of du'as, but how do you take action after you've made your du'as? Right? After you made your du'as, how do you take action? And for many years, a lot of my du'as would go unanswered, quote unquote unanswered, because I wouldn't take action on them. I didn't know how to take action on it. And so I studied this topic in depth and designed a course called Dreamwalker. So, and Dreamwalker is all about how do you walk those dreams? How do you take action? So here are, obviously it's a full course, but let me give you some 3 tips from on how to take action. Number 1 is taking responsibility. So a lot of people, when they don't take action, they blame something else. And when the first thing that I do in the Dreamwalker course is tell everybody, take out your pen and paper and write an accountability statement. That if I don't take action, I'm the one who decided to sleep in. I'm the one who decided to watch Netflix all night long, and in the morning I don't have any energy to wake up for Fajr, stuff like that. I'm the one who decided not to, you know, I bought a program and I didn't watch the videos. That was my decision, and I take responsibility for it and accountability. So first off is taking accountability, not because as soon as you start blaming something else, you lose all accountability. There's no power to you. You have to take accountability. Even when you commit a sin, Shaitan didn't do it. You did it.
Yeah.
You know, Shaitan whispers. But he's like, hey, if I'm committing the sin, I'm for. Anyways, you get the idea. Taking accountability. The second thing is identity. So identity is who is it? You know, this thing that you want to take action on. Who is it that would have no problem taking action on this thing? So for example, somebody wants to work out, they usually have an identity like I'm a fat guy. So fat guys don't work out, or I'm a procrastinator. That's their identity. So I'm really careful about identity. So an athlete would get up and do the exercise. If they were like, you know, playing football or something like that, they would do the exercise. We know those football guys are exercising because that's how they identify themselves. So what I do is I tell students that take the identity of somebody who would take action and start calling yourself that. So you might start saying, I'm an athlete, I'm an athlete, I'm an athlete. And then your mind is like, no, you're not. Yes. Your mind will say, this is not true. And why is your mind saying this? Your mind is saying that this is not true because you don't do what athletes do. You don't do the habits of athletes, which is the last point that I'll mention here is you start building habits that you do so much until finally you believe the identity. And it's like, so I'll give you an example of that. I wanted a couple of years, I made this dua to snowboard down Whistler Mountain. It's one of the biggest mountains in Canada. And I didn't even know how to snowboard at that time. I think I took like one lesson. And so I was like, this is the biggest mountain. And I was freaked out and all of this stuff. And I started saying to myself, I'm a snowboarder, even though I wasn't a snowboarder. But I kept doing it. I went like 40 hours, 40 classes. And until finally, and I have my snowboarding helmet right here, and I have my snowboarding gear right beside me right now, because I did it so much, and I did the habits of snowboarding so much until I became a snowboarder. And then now it's become the identity that I used to call myself. I built the habits underneath it. So those are just 3 things on how do you take action. That's why I'm saying it's a lot more complicated than, like, it takes time. Yeah. And if there's one last thing about taking time, I found that, consistent actions, checking in, it takes about 8 months of checking in every week until it finally clicks. 8 months, right? That's checking in every week. And even if you check in every week, like, I did not do this. Every week you're saying, I didn't do it. And then I kind of did it after like 4 months. After 5-6 months, then you're like, I did it. But it takes time to settle into your mind, into your heart.
Amazing. Jazakallah khair. I'm so glad I asked that question. Okay, Sheikh, I have a bit of a surprise, right, for you, and it's like a blast from your past. Okay, so let me show it to you.
Special guest.
Yeah, it's a special guest. It's a very special guest, right? And then I'll ask you a question around it. So let me just show you the special guest first. Bismillah. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, so
and I'm asking myself, what is that doing?
Yeah, I know. That's exactly what my wife says as well. So I'll explain. Basically, I stole it. Okay, I stole it. But I want you to
now we know.
Yeah, now we know. So, but I just want you to explain, like, what is this and why did you do it?
So the purpose of that's the Liwat cup. So when I was teaching the history of Khulafa class, and I saw that a lot of the companions, when they would fight in these battles, they used to organize themselves according to tribe. So they wouldn't fight as random people, but their brothers and cousins and uncles and stuff like that. A whole tribe would fight together. So if there was ever a part of the army that went down, it was actually a whole tribe of people from a certain city that they're the ones who did it, and they can be held accountable as a tribe. So I said to myself, well, I want to apply this to my students, so that instead of everybody coming to the class as individuals, I would like them to have this bond of, build community bonds by giving them a tribal name, so that when I give exams, instead of people, it doesn't matter if I show up to the exam or not, I would give the mark based on the cumulative mark of everybody. So if you decided to not come to the exam, then your tribe, your city of London, for example, would go down. And other cities were like that. That's in the early days of AlMaghrib. It still continues. And alhamdulillah, it took AlMaghrib to another level when everybody kind of started bonding together as tribes. And we initially got some because with tribalism comes jahiliyyah also. And we also experienced this. A lot of students started being mean to other students. They're like tribalism and arrogance. And I'm like, hey, you know what, Prophet ﷺ, there's good in tribalism and there's bad. And so the liwa, so here's a side story as well, that initially we wanted to make the cup a flag. And it would have been really scary to have walk in with la ilaha type of black flag into like American universities and that was 20 years ago or something. And so we tried to get it printed, and the person who wanted to make it, refused to make it. The leather. And then we said, hey, instead of this being a flag and freaking people out, let us turn it into a cup. So it became the liwat. Liwat means flag, and it became the liwat flag. If you can lift it up again, sure. I'll show. And you'll see for the people that those are names of tribes that have won the flag over the years. So you'll see year after year the different cities that have won it, and it comes along the lines of the Stanley Cup. In Canada, we love hockey, ice hockey, and the Stanley Cup. And when somebody wins the Stanley Cup, they get their name on the cup. So that's what we did for the World Cup.
And London won it many times, and London's like the current holder. That's the reason why I stole it, alhamdulillah. Fantastic. Okay, Sheikh, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. I really, really appreciate it.
Let me finish off with one last story for your people, because it came to my mind when you said earlier on about were you ever nervous or shy about giving speeches, and I kind of like remembered the first speech that I gave, and it brought a smile to my face. So I'll share with you guys that first speech. So I was in Medina University. This was like 30-year university. So my age at that time would have been like 20 years old or 21, 22, something like that. And there was a brothers halaqah in Medina, and they said, hey, Muhammad, we'd like you to prepare a speech. And my speech was how to win Allah's love according to like verses of Quran that speak about the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna Allah yuhibbut tawwabin wa yuhibbul mutatahhirin. For example, those kind of verses. So I prepared index cards, and like I said, I worked really hard on this speech. And I had these cards ready, and then I got the message that the halaqah was canceled. Halaqah was canceled. I had these index cards, and I never got to give that speech. So I had an exam that year that was so hard. And I had failed this exam the year before, and I had to redo the entire year. And now was the redo of this exam like 2 years later. I'm redoing this exam, and this is the weekend of study. So I get a knock on the door, and it's a Canadian brother saying, hey, there's a group from the US who've come for Umrah, and they were wondering if you could give a speech. And there was no phones. I say knock on the door, like the brother literally had to come after Jummah, knock on my door and tell me, would you like to give a speech? So I thought to myself, I said, look, I got this big exam coming up, and I need Allah's help. So if I help them, then Allah will help me. Wallahu fi auni al-abd, ma kana al-abdu fi auni akhi. That Allah will be forever in the service of his slave, so long as his slave is in the service of his brothers. So I said, you know what? I will do it. Even though I have this exam, and this is the most important exam in my whole life, I'll do this speech. So after Asr, I went and I brought my index card. I had this speech ready. And you can imagine Muhammad AlShareef, first lecture. And this speech, like I felt it and I was crying. It was coming from the heart, you know, vintage Muhammad AlShareef, like first speech that I ever gave. People in the audience were loving it. It was an amazing speech. And then after the speech, as we were walking for the Salah, I think it was Maghrib Salah in Medina, the guy who I gave a speech, he dropped me like a tip in my pocket. And I was like, oh, that's good. So we didn't have money. That's like half my monthly. I'm like, I didn't expect that, but it is greatly appreciated. Please support your local imams. And then he said to me, how would you like to come for Hajj with us? I'm like, come for Hajj with you? I would love to. A tent and food? I'm coming, man. Because we sleep on the streets when we go for Hajj. And subhanAllah, that group was Dar es Salaam from the US. And alhamdulillah, like you said, I was able to perform Hajj like 24 years because of, you know, giving that first speech, you know, because I had that intention to help. And even after I left Medina, they brought me to do the Hajj and stuff like that. So good things come when you help other people.
Yeah, amazing ROI for that one speech, man. Oh, amazing.
Right, yeah.
Excellent. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, for all your time, for your wonderful advice.
Jazakallah khair, you had really good questions.
I know everyone watching, you've played your part, Sheikh, in them becoming better leaders and better CEOs. Brothers and sisters, this is the Muslim CEO Show. I hope you guys enjoyed the show as much as I did doing it. If you haven't already done so, then please subscribe to the channel. Check out our free training at muslimceo.com. Jazakumullah khair once again to you, Sheikh, and inshallah we'll catch you guys in the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.